Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Hello again, modellers, and we're back in the workshop yet again. I'm going to be doing something on the Blackburn monoplane today that is probably going to really wreck your eyesight. It's going to wreck my fingers. I've been at it for about 4 hours so far, and in those 4 hours I've made 4 turnbuckles. In fact, 5, but I haven't fitted the 5th one to the airframe yet. So somebody expressed an interest on knowing how I was going to make these, and the original way I was going to do it was to insert just the shank and the eyelet from fishing hooks, and I bought in a batch of 100 number 26 size fishing hooks, and actually they look great, but it doesn't quite work. So unfortunately the fishing hooks don't actually have a complete loop in the eye. It's got a very slight opening, and that allows the line that I'm tying to loop back out again, which is not very clever, is it? So I mean, I can fiddle around and crimp them back closed so that they are a complete eye, but I've abandoned it. I'm just going to make the eyes the way I've shown you before, with copper wire twisted on a little mandrel in my finger. It's a bit painstaking, but it's very satisfying when you get to see a close-up of how this rigging looks. It's lovely. It really is nice, and it was worth waiting for the tubing to arrive. This is the tubing, which you won't even be able to see, I doubt. The camera won't even focus on it, I dare say. Oh, how am I going to get this in shot? Oh dear. There we go. 1 millimetre in diameter with a 0.5 millimetre hole in the middle. And literally the thread I'm using is about 0.2 thick. So when I double it over and feed it back through, it only just does it. So it's a little bit difficult. Anyway, before I blabber on too much, I'm going to zoom right in and I'll show you how I make one turnbuckle, and then how I turn it into a section of line, and then how I attach that one line to the model. I think I've got about 50 to do, and you're only going to see 1, and it's taken me 4 hours to do 4 effectively, and 1 loose bit. I'll just give you a quick view of how it looks when it's done. Again, it won't focus, I'm sure, but that's the turnbuckle that we're going to make. Okay, so what I do is I make them like this as a length of line with the turnbuckle in the join, and then that I then fit to the model. I also have to make little eyelets that go on the airframe, and I use my little trusty drill with a tiny bit in it to make a tiny hole in the structure, and then that's where the little eyelet gets glued with super glue, thick super glue, and then the line gets strung between the eyelets. Fiddly is an understatement. Let's get cracking. I'll show you how to assemble one. Right then, here we go, and I'll show you start to finish how one turnbuckle is made. Well, not quite all of it, because what I've done is I've drawn little increments on this tubing, which you probably can't see, and it's just so that I make them all the same size, and then I've cut several of them. I've got about 15 or 20 of them in a little tray here, cut to length. I won't show you how to cut that, you've seen it before. I just roll the knife gently. What I am doing is I'm opening up the holes in the end of the tube, because the act of rolling them just closes the ends slightly, and because I'm right on the limit, I just put a pin in the end and give it a bit of a twirl, just force it in there a little bit, and then I turn it around and do the other end, just to make sure that I've got the clearance that I need. Okay, so that's that bit done. Then if you actually look at one of these turnbuckles, it has a raised ridge right in the middle. So what I do is I put the piece of tube on the end of the pin. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this. What I'm going to do is zoom in afterwards, so you might stand a chance of seeing it. I've got some aluminium adhesive ducting sort of tape, and all I'm doing is cutting a strip about 10 millimeters long. No, about 15. Well, let me tell you how long it is. It's 15 mil long and about 1 millimeter wide. And all I do is I lift that off of the paper. Just put my fingernail on the end just to tear it, and I get my tube. Finished with that. That can get out of the way. So I get my tube and I just apply the tape to the midpoint like that. And so far I don't think I've got one in the middle. They're all sort of down to one end. And then you literally have to just rotate the tube and dab it down. All I'm doing is winding the aluminium tape onto the brass tube. Did I say it was fiddly? It's extremely fiddly. And that entire 15 millimeter length I wrap around the tube. Oh, without dropping it, preferably. I wonder why that wasn't actually working. I think I was actually spinning the tube rather than actually applying the aluminium tape. There we go, that's going on a lot better. And then if I just hold it in my fingertips and twirl it, it'll usually seal the ends. And there we go. You probably can't see that at all, but it's a brass tube with a little bit of aluminium wrapped around, a little 1 millimeter wide section of aluminium, and it just gives the impression that it's fatter at that point. Now what we need to do is make the end fittings. Now for that I'm using 36 gauge, which is 0.25 thick copper wire. I showed you this before, but I put the wire through this little, it's just a little shaped piece of piano wire, and the diameter of the piano wire determines the diameter of the hook or the eyelet. So I just put it in that loop, bend it double, hold it tight and twist it until I've got a nice length of twist and it's wrapped tightly enough that it actually is round. Slide it off what I call the mandrel, and you have an eyelet. So I cut that very short. I only leave about 2 millimeters on the end of it. Then I make another one. Bend the piano wire over, hold it tight, twirl it round till it's tight enough that the loop is nice and round. And then I cut that one off, again about 2 millimeters. What I have to do is make sure that these are shorter than half the length of the tube, because obviously I'm going to push these in the end of the tube. Obviously, he says. There's nothing obvious about doing this bit. Right, so for this bit I've got these tweezers that are biased towards clamping rather than releasing. Some tweezers you have to squeeze them to clamp, this one you have to squeeze to release, so it's fairly useful. So I'm holding the one tube in the one section, picking up the other, and that is exactly what happens. It goes ping and flies across the room. I did actually hear it land on paper, and the only piece of paper is just there, so it should be on there somewhere. You can imagine I have made loads of these where they've gone flying and I just can't find them. I've given up and I made another one. In this instance think I see the little blighter. There it is. Right, so we'll grab it again. This time I'm going to put he's just flown off again. That is in there. This time I'm going to put the tweezers down through the eye, because that does tend to be a better way of grasping them. You can see how the fun and games I'm having here. So now the eye is actually trapped on the tweezers. Now the next bit of fun and games is I've got to get two sections of 0.25 that are twisted together to go down a 0.5mm hole, and they will just go. Then a tiny drop CA, thin CA, count to 5, and then what you need to do is wick the excess off, because it's gone down inside the joint, and that's what you want. That's good, but now you need to just wick off the excess. You'll probably also find that it's glued itself to the to the tweezers, so you're probably going to have to prise them off. There we go, it's gone pinging off again over there. So putting the tweezers through the eyelet is the safest way of doing this. It still doesn't guarantee they're going to remain on the table. Right, so that's got hold of that one. See if he'll go into that hole. What can also happen is that the glue from the one you've already done can get in the hole and stop this one going in. What can happen is when you cut the end of the little eyelet, when you cut it with a scalpel, it can squash the copper. And instead of being a clean cut, it's squashed, and then it's bigger than the 0.5mm hole. If that happens, I'll just recut the end of it. It's lined up, it just won't go in. So I'm just going to cut the end of it, just to make sure it's cut true. Come back here, little blighter. Alright, so that's recut. It's just went flying again. Trouble is I didn't see where that one went. No, I think we've lost that one. So you can see now the sort of fun and games I'm having. And as I said at the beginning, I've got 50 of these roughly to make. Madness, absolute madness. Let's make another one. I will of course find it in a minute as soon as I've made another one. There's another one made. Try and get that in that hole. Definitely doesn't want to go. Not had to do this yet on any of them, but of course because the camera's rolling, it's bound to go wrong. Thinking about it, what I might have done on the others, or what I might try on the others, is putting these in first, both ends, before gluing, and then I'll glue them both together. That's wrecked the aluminium foil. So I made 4 of these, 5 in fact, and it's been fine. I come to do one for the camera, and of course it's not going well. If you aren't good with your fingers and dexterity, you will really struggle with this. I like to think I'm pretty good at stuff like this, but now I'm having a struggle. And that's gone in. Rotate it slightly to be in line with the other one, not that it really matters, it looks nicer. And we just glue that end in. Wick the excess out, and that's the turnbuckle That's the two ends done. There we go. Hopefully I can zoom in on that. I'll hold it still long enough to get the camera to zoom. So that's the first stage. So that's the turnbuckle made. The next thing I need to do is actually add 2 lengths of line to it. As a bit of an addendum to that video where I've just, or the section that I've just shown you as to how I made the turnbuckles, I'm going to show you another way. And this I discovered about halfway through, because if you recall in that first section I said I wanted to use fishing hooks, but the loop of the hook actually ended up being open, and that was no good. I needed the hook to be you know, fully circular, or not the hook but the eye where you tie it. And it wasn't, and that's why I'd abandoned it. I'd gone back to twisting the wire, the copper wire, and making it that way, which is a very fiddly way of doing it. But after doing 3 or 4, which I did on here, on the fuselage, I thought, that can't be right. Maybe that was just a faulty hook. So I went back to the box of hooks, and sure enough, I must have just picked up one that had an opened loop at the end. So I thought, oh, I'll go back to trying to use the fishing hooks, and I'm just going to show you how I do it with the fishing hook, because it's not much different, but it's actually a lot simpler and a lot quicker. So first of all, we start with the same main ingredients that we had before. So we've got the little piece of copper tube, 1mm outer, 0.5mm inside diameter, and I run a 0.5mm drill through it just to make sure that the ends are completely burr free from where I've cut them. Then you'll see this is just plastic insulation, and it's just cut into little lengths, and it's just stripped from wire. And you'll recognise the wire when you see it. It's a solid copper wire, and it's usually in twisted pairs like this. And it's used on the telephone systems and what have you. And I've got a chunk of it, and I just strip off some of the insulation and cut it into little bits. So that's what we're using for gluing the cable closed and shut. And the cable I'm using, I've showed you before. Again, it's 0.010 of an inch, or 0.25 mil. That means 2 layers of this will just go through the tubing, which is exactly what we want. But actually that doesn't go through the tubing anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But what is important is the diameter of the hook's shank is 0.45. It's just big enough to go through the tubing. So without any further ado, let's show you how it's done. First of all, it's very fiddly, and again I apologise if you can't actually see a lot of this. You'll just have to take my word for it. I'll try and keep the description clear so it's all okay. I need to cut the fishing hook, and I just want the loop, the hoop, and the rest can go in the bin, although the rest of it can actually be turned into the shape of a round eyelet, which we can then use for making hooks, not sharp hooks like this, but rounded hooks. And these will be used to make the rigging demountable, because I want to be able to take the wings off for transport and shipping. So the rigging wires on the wings actually will have little round hooks on the end, and I'm hoping to reuse the hooks that I've cut off to make them. So there you see just the eye and the straight bit of stem. So then all we need to do is take our piece of copper tube, try and pick up one of these eyes, and try and feed it into the end of the tubing. Now what can happen is when you cut the hook, instead of it cutting cleanly, you can end up cutting with a sort of a burr on the edge, and that will make it a bit difficult. That will make it difficult to insert in the tubing. Sometimes a slightly round rotating motion will get the thing in there. Sometimes you need a little bit more force than tweezers will allow, but it will go. And there you go. That's one end in. I'm actually finding it just as easy to use my fingers. So I'm just giving it a sort of a twisting motion, just to trying to break that, you know, just get it to force it into that tubing, because the size is very close. Fiddly is the word, but it will go. What you've got to make sure is that you don't end up with the shanks being too long, because the tubing isn't that long, so you need to bury half and half. I like to turn them so that they're at the same orientation, not that it really matters. And there we have the beastie assembled. All that I do then is I put a little tiny drop of C8 on the end, and as you've seen before, I like to just wick it away, wick the excess away. Helps it to dry a little bit quicker. So that's that bit done. The wrapping of the silver foil, which you saw before, is exactly the same. So I just cut a little 1mm, 1.5mm wide strip. Peel it off, try and position it in the middle. Best I can. Wrap the end round. Then it's simply a case of using the tweezers, wrapping it round and around. When you get to about that much left, you can just twirl it in your fingers just to finish it off. Oops, assuming you got it straight, which I haven't. There we go. So that gives us the sort of the raised section that's in the middle. I have got some brass or some copper tape, and I did try that, but copper on the brass just looks as silly as silver on brass. So what I really need is a brass tape, and I don't know that I've ever seen a brass adhesive tape. The copper tape is used as a sort of a slug repellent, self-adhesive slug repellent. So if you ever need copper, self-adhesive copper, that's a good way of getting the stuff. So that's the turnbuckle made. The others, you know, adding the line to the end is exactly the same as you saw on the previous section, where we just threaded it through the insulation tubing, then through the turnbuckle, oops, I didn't think that had gone through. And then back through the insulation. It's fiddly. But it's not impossible. Then you just pull it too, so you get a nice loop on the end. Again, a little, that was a bit too much. All right, some C8, just wicked into there. Hope you can get the tweezers off if you've not glued it. You might find it stays wet for a little while and it might stop the shackle from hanging freely. But and then I found these little nail scissors are really good for cutting this. This wire is steel wire with a plastic coating. It's called bright steel. It is the colour. And I just pull it close and then cut it. And that gives us the turnbuckle in the end. And then I add another tail to the other side and then fit it to the aircraft in whatever location I need. I think I might try making one turnbuckle with a hook on it in a minute and just see how that looks. But there you go, that's how it's done, and that's how I ended up making them. I think they look slightly better with the fixed eyes on the end than with the twisted wire. But I'm still using the twisted wire to create the anchor points and to mount them on the model. So I'll just close this video with a quick look around at what I've done, and you can see how it's turned out. So here's the rigging wires and the turnbuckles all done for the front part of the fuselage. There's some that goes, or there's one that goes from the lower front of the engine up to the struts, up to the undercarriage bracing. There's a double section at the front, 2 layers. I'm going to have to do these side ones again because I've put the turnbuckles above the intersection. Well, almost on the intersection. That's not right. They should be right up here. So I'm going to remake those 2 wires on this side, and 2 wires on the other side are wrong as well. But the rest are about right. Those 2 at the back should actually be above the intersection as well, so I might change those. But we're getting there. Anyway, there you go. Madness, isn't it? But it's good fun. Really good fun. All right. Well, if you've enjoyed that video, please click like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.